"You won't believe what this cat did to save a baby." One morning, a horrifying scream echoed, and what happened next changed a family forever. Prepare yourselves for a story of animal courage that will touch your hearts. If stories like this move you, leave your like, comment what you thought, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any. What can be more terrifying for a first-time mother than the silence of the early morning broken by a sound that doesn't belong to normality? A sound that speaks directly to the most primitive fear. On a cold autumn morning that dragged on through a quiet suburban neighborhood of modest houses, a sharp meow, almost a piercing shriek, tore through the dense silence that enveloped the home of Claire and Lucas. The sound came from the room of Leo, the little miracle of just 3 months who had transformed their lives. Claire, 32, a meticulous architect and now a full-time mother, felt her heart freeze, a block of ice sinking in her chest. Her anxiety, a striking trait of her personality, always at the ready like a soldier on eternal watch, shot up, turning the blood in her veins into an electric current of dread. The first months of Claire's pregnancy were lived in a haze of happiness and meticulous planning, every detail of the future carefully drawn in her architect's mind. Whiskers, the short-haired gray cat they adopted as a kitten 5 years ago, a feline of usually reserved and independent temperament, a stoic observer of the everyday, initially seemed indifferent to Claire's growing belly. He, who had always preferred the watchful solitude from the top of the bookshelf, a fluffy monarch in his castle of books, to the effusive company of humans, began, however, to subtly change, as if an underground current of ancestral instinct was pulling him into a new orbit. In the 6th month of gestation, an event that Claire registered with the precision of someone noting a change in a project, Whiskers started sleeping at the foot of the couple's bed, a warm gray ball in the dark, something unprecedented in their 5 years together. Claire, with her observant nature, noticed the change, but attributed it, perhaps with a hint of a desire for normality, to the alteration in the house's routine, to the different scent she herself exhaled, to the energies that were reconfiguring with the imminence of the new life. When Leo was born, a small sun breaking through the clouds of expectation, the modest house, previously a refuge of calm and silence for the couple, filled with the sounds and smells of a new life. The sharp cry that was both music and alarm, the sweet scent of milk and powder, the constant presence of diapers and wipes. Whiskers, to the genuine surprise of Claire and Lucas, showed a peculiar, almost reverent interest in the newcomer. While Lucas, a pragmatic engineer of 35, whose mind worked in straight lines and logical solutions, assembled the crib with an almost solemn dedication as if building a sanctuary. Whiskers inspected each piece, rubbing against the light wooden bars, his slender body weaving between Lucas's legs, leaving his scent, marking territory, or perhaps, who knows, blessing the new furniture. Claire, despite the crushing fatigue and the emotional roller coaster of the postpartum period, which made her transition from euphoria to tears in a matter of seconds, felt a comforting warmth, a small ember of hope in her chest, seeing the cat, previously so distant and self-sufficient, now purring softly, a little engine of contentment whenever she breastfed Leo in the armchair next to the crib. The bond between Whiskers and the baby seemed to form silently, an invisible web of affection and feline curiosity, woven thread by thread in moments of quietude, in the cat's lingering gazes at the helpless little being. Claire's internal conflict, however, was a persistent shadow. The constant fear of not being a good enough mother, of failing to protect that fragile and dependent being, was an uncomfortable companion, whispering doubts in her ears during the long, sleepless nights. This anxiety was like a poisonous ivy, growing around her heart, threatening to suffocate the pure joy of motherhood. She vaguely remembered her own mother, a strong woman, but one who seemed to carry the weight of the world and unspoken worries, and Claire feared repeating a cycle of apprehension. That meow, however, was not the soft purr or the call for food. It was an alarm, a feline siren that made Claire jump out of bed, sleep instantly evaporating. Lucas, awakened by the sudden movement and the echo of the strange sound, was already getting up, confusion still clouding his eyes. "What was that?" he mumbled, his voice hoarse. Claire didn't answer, already running barefoot down the cold hallway, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Fear painted terrible scenarios in her mind. Leo choking. Leo with a raging fever. Leo. She couldn't complete the thought. Reaching the baby's room door, she hesitated for a fraction of a second, a paralyzing fear overwhelming her. What if something terrible had happened? What if she wasn't prepared for what she would find? The cold doorknob under her trembling hand was the only point of contact with reality. She pushed the door open. The dim light from the teddy bear-themed lamp revealed the crib. Leo slept serenely, his breathing soft and regular, his little hands curled near his face. An immense relief, like a warm wave, washed over Claire, almost making her legs give out. But then where was Whiskers? And what was that sound? Lucas arrived behind her, his hand on her shoulder. "He's fine," he said, his voice still heavy with sleep, but with a tone of tranquility that Claire envied. It was then they saw him. Whiskers was huddled near the window, his fur bristling, his eyes two bright green slits in the dark, fixed on something outside. He was growling low, a guttural sound Claire had never heard him make before. This was new, behavior that didn't fit the Whiskers they knew. The window was closed, but the blind had a small gap. What could have caused such agitation in the cat, to the point of letting out that meow that sounded like a cry for help or a desperate warning? Lucas, ever the pragmatic one, went to the window, carefully moved the blind, and looked outside. The street was deserted, bathed in the pale light of the street lamps, the trees still in the absence of wind. "There's nothing there," he said, turning to Claire with a shrug. "Must have been a stray cat or a possum." Whiskers got scared. Claire wasn't convinced. Whiskers' growl wasn't one of fright, it was one of threat, of readiness for combat. And the initial meow, the one that had pulled her out of bed, had been different, almost human in its desperation. She picked Leo up, the warmth of the baby's body against hers slightly calming the storm in her chest. Leo's scent was her anchor, her promise of light. In the days that followed, normality tried to re-establish itself, but a thin layer of apprehension remained like dust on the furniture. Claire found herself observing Whiskers more closely. The cat seemed more vigilant, patrolling the house with unusual seriousness. His trips into the yard became shorter and more focused. He spent long periods sitting near the back door or the window of Leo's room, ears perked, body tense. Lucas, meanwhile, tried to minimize the incident, attributing it to animal instinct heightened by the baby's presence. "He's just being protective, Claire. It's normal." But for Claire, whose anxiety was a filter that amplified any sign of danger, the change in Whiskers was a premonition. A small strange event occurred a week later. Claire found one of Leo's toys, a plastic rattle, which she was sure she had left on the dresser, on the floor, near the bedroom door, as if it had been dragged. She attributed it to the wind, to her own carelessness, but the seed of doubt was already planted. To try and calm her nerves and have some concrete proof of what was happening when she wasn't looking, Claire decided to buy a baby monitor with a camera and motion sensor. Lucas thought it was excessive, another symptom of Claire's overprotection, but he gave in, hoping it would bring his wife some peace. Installing the device was a small ritual. Claire positioned the camera to have a clear view of the crib and a good part of the room. That night, she could barely sleep, her eyes glued to the monitor screen beside the bed. Everything seemed normal. Leo snored. Whiskers slept on a poof in the corner of the room. Around 3 in the morning, however, a motion alert on her phone app woke her up. With her heart pounding, she saw on the screen Whiskers suddenly stand up, his body arched, staring intently at a dark spot under the crib. There was no sound, just the grainy image of the cat on high alert. Nothing else happened, and Whiskers eventually lay back down, but not to sleep. He stayed there, a gray sphinx, eyes fixed on the darkness. Claire felt a chill. There was something there, Whiskers knew, and she, with her anxiety that so many judged excessive, might have been right all along. The faith she placed in her maternal instincts, previously wavering, began to gain a little more firmness. like a stubborn sprout breaking through hard ground. The situation began to subtly escalate. Small scratches appeared on the baseboard of Leo's room, near the spot Whiskers stared at so much. A strange smell, musky and slightly sweet, hung in the air on certain mornings, disappearing as quickly as it arose. Lucas, confronted with the scratches, finally admitted there might be a little mouse in the house. "Let's set some mouse traps, that'll fix it quickly," he said, practical as always. They bought mouse traps, bait, everything recommended. For the first few days, nothing. The bait untouched, the traps unset. Whiskers, however, continued his vigil, growing more intense. He barely ate, spent hours in silence observing. His fur, previously shiny, seemed a little duller, and he had lost some weight. Claire worried about him as much as she did about the invisible danger. It was as if the cat carried the burden of protecting the house alone, a small sentinel against a threat that only he and Claire seemed to take entirely seriously. One afternoon, while talking to an older neighbor, Mrs. Lords, a lady who had lived on the street for decades and knew all the neighborhood stories, Claire mentioned, in passing, the problem with a possible rodent. Mrs. Lords frowned. "Be careful, my dear. With those new constructions near the creek, people have been saying the rats are different. Bigger, bolder, something never seen around here." The information landed like a stone in Claire's stomach. Rats, not just a little mouse. The word echoed in her mind, bringing with it images of disease, of real danger to her baby. The anxiety, which had been momentarily dormant, returned with full force, a dark wave threatening to engulf her. That night, the baby monitor captured something that made Claire's blood run cold. A shadow, larger than she had imagined, moved quickly under the crib. It wasn't a mouse, it was big, agile. And Whiskers, who was in the room, lunged towards it, disappearing from the camera's view. Claire heard a sharp hiss, a sound of struggle, and then Whiskers' furious meow. She and Lucas ran to the room. They found Whiskers with his fur all bristled, growling at the empty space under the crib. There was no sign of the creature, but the musky smell was stronger than ever. And on the floor, near where Whiskers was, a few drops of blood. Was it Whiskers or the creature's? Claire frantically examined Whiskers but found no visible injuries. The cat, however, was trembling, not from fear, but from a contained fury, from adrenaline. Lucas, now pale and visibly worried, finally understood the seriousness of the situation. "My God, Claire, you were right. This isn't a little mouse." From that moment on, the hunt became a war operation. Lucas sealed every crack. He found, placed poison in safe locations out of reach of Leo and Whiskers and more powerful traps. The house, previously a nest of love and tranquility, turned into a battlefield. The tension was palpable, cutting the air like a knife. Claire barely slept, startled by any noise. Leo, oblivious to everything, continued to smile and babble, a small island of innocence in the midst of the storm. Whiskers was the personification of vigilance. He seemed to have definitively assumed the role of Leo's guardian. Wherever the baby was, Whiskers was nearby, observing, sniffing, always alert. His feline instinct, sharpened by millennia of hunting and survival, was now the family's primary line of defense. He was the silent lighthouse in the storm that had descended upon their home. One night, a few weeks after that first terrifying meow, the crisis reached its peak. It was a particularly cold morning, the wind howling outside, making the windows rattle. Claire was exhausted, but a bad feeling kept her awake. Lucas slept soundly beside her, worn out by the week's work and sleepless nights. On the baby monitor, Leo slept peacefully. Whiskers wasn't in the baby's room, which was unusual. Claire felt a knot in her stomach. Where could the cat be? Suddenly, a sound, a persistent scratching, coming from the wall of Leo's room, near the crib. Then a dull thud, as if something had fallen. Claire jumped up, her heart pounding. She ran to Leo's room. The scene she found paralyzed her with horror. A huge rat, larger than anything she could have imagined, was trying to climb the bars of the crib. Its red eyes gleamed in the dim light fixed on Leo. The baby, awakened by the noise, began to whimper. Claire screamed, a strangled sound of pure terror. She tried to move forward, but fear pinned her to the ground. It was at that instant, when despair threatened to consume her, that Whiskers appeared. Like a gray lightning bolt, he jumped from the top of the wardrobe, where he had been hiding, observing, waiting for the right moment. He landed directly on the rat, in a tangle of fur, claws, and teeth. The fight was brutal, savage. Hisses, growls, the sound of bodies colliding. Claire, finally freed from paralysis, grabbed Leo from the crib, shielding him in her arms, retreating towards the door. Lucas, awakened by the screams, arrived running, encountering the fierce battle. Whiskers fought with the fury of a lion. The rat was large and strong, defending itself fiercely, but the cat did not back down. He was smaller, but his agility, his determination, his instinctive love for the little human he had adopted as his own, gave him surprising strength. He was the personification of courage in its purest form, a small, indomitable flame against the invading darkness. There was a final sharp squeak from the rat, and then silence, broken only by Whiskers' ragged breathing. The cat slowly moved away from the rodent's motionless body. He was injured. There was a nasty cut on his ear and a bleeding scratch on his paw. But he was alive, and Leo was safe. Lucas, having overcome the initial shock, acted quickly. He removed the rat's body while Claire, trembling, tried to calm Leo, who was now crying, frightened. Whiskers approached her, limping a little, and rubbed his head against her leg, letting out a weak purr, almost a sigh. Claire knelt down and carefully hugged him, the tears finally coming, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and pain for the suffering of her little hero. "Oh, Whiskers, my brave Whiskers," she whispered, stroking his soft fur. The cat, despite the pain, seemed to understand. He had fulfilled his mission. That night, no one slept anymore. They took Whiskers to the emergency vet. The injuries, though painful, were not serious. He would need antibiotics, bandages, and lots of rest. While they waited, Claire and Lucas talked, adrenaline still running through their veins. "I'll never doubt you or this cat again," said Lucas, his voice choked. "He saved our son." Claire felt a wave of warmth wash over her body. It wasn't just relief, but a new strength, a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Her anxiety hadn't completely disappeared, but now it was different, tempered by experience, by the proof that her instincts and Whiskers were right. She looked at the cat, curled up in her lap in the car seat, and felt a gratitude so deep it hurt. That small, reserved being had revealed a loyalty and courage that transcended any expectation. In the days that followed, the house underwent a transformation. Lucas, with the help of a professional, discovered that the rats were coming from a neighboring vacant lot where an abandoned construction site had created a perfect nest for the rodents. The problem was resolved, the invasion route sealed. The local community, alerted by Claire and Lucas's experience, also took measures, and tranquility, little by little, began to return to the neighborhood. Whiskers recovered slowly. He became even more attached to Leo, spending hours beside the crib, now no longer as a tense vigilant, but as a serene guardian, a silent companion. Claire also changed. The constant fear of failing as a mother gave way to a calmer acceptance of her own vulnerabilities, but also to a renewed faith in her ability to protect her son. With the unexpected help of a gray cat, she even started talking more openly with her own mother, sharing her insecurities and discovering that, behind the facade of strength, her mother had also lived similar fears. This sharing brought a new light to their relationship. That cold and frightening autumn gave way to a winter of introspection and healing, and then to a spring of renewal. The house, which had been the scene of so much fear, became a home again. But something fundamental had changed. The family dynamic had deepened, the love between Claire and Lucas strengthened by the crisis, the bond with Leo even more precious, and Whiskers' place in the family, cemented forever as that of the unlikely hero, the furry, whiskered guardian angel. Claire often found herself watching Whiskers and Leo together. The baby now crawled, and Whiskers followed him patiently, sometimes allowing Leo to pull his tail with surprising tolerance. In these moments, Claire felt a deep peace, like the clear waters of a well after a storm, reflecting a cleaner sky. Anxiety still came to visit her from time to time, like an unwanted old acquaintance, but now she had tools to deal with it. Self-confidence, Lucas's support, and the memory of the courage of a small cat who had taught everyone the true meaning of loyalty and protection. That piercing meow on the cold morning hadn't just been a danger alarm, but the call to a journey of transformation where faith, light, and hope were rediscovered in the most unexpected places, especially in the brave heart of a cat named Whiskers. He wasn't just a pet. He was family. He was a protector, living proof that the greatest heroes sometimes come in the most unassuming packages, with a soft purr and eyes full of ancestral wisdom. And so, life went on, richer, deeper, forever marked by the silent bravery of their feline guardian.